So one of the ways in which we protect ourselves from our unconscious, from these really scary memories or motivations, fears, is through something called defense mechanisms. Now, while Freud was the one who originated the idea of the unconscious, and he's the one that kind of came up with this idea of like defenses, his daughter, Anna Freud, really took his ideas and really started to kind of study it more in depth, like what are defense mechanisms and how exactly do they work? And again, I think defenses is a very common idea. Like it's very popular in pop culture to say you're defensive or that's a defense mechanism. I think sometimes we really miss on like what is the core idea of defenses. So a defense mechanism, it's an unconscious process. The minute you are aware that it's a defense, it changes the flavor of it. It changes the power of it. So generally, a part of what makes a defense is that it is unconscious. So it's an unconscious strategy. We really believe that we are so self-aware. What we may not understand is that self-awareness is a defense. So we think this is the truth. We're not aware of how this sense of self-awareness is actually a defense against, a protection against anxiety, emotional discomfort, or threats to our sense of self. So these defense mechanisms help us manage feelings or thoughts that might be painful, overwhelming, difficult to confront directly. And of course, it's important that we acknowledge that defense mechanisms are adaptive. They were created out of a context, out of relating and being related to in a way that helped, that was painful or that stirred things up. And so we developed defenses to help us cope in the short term. But the problem with defenses is not that they exist. We need protection against anxiety. We can't always be in touch with anxiety, right? Like if we were always in touch with how out of control we are and how life can come at us fast and we can die at any moment. If we were always in touch with that, I think we would have a really hard time surviving. We would have a hard time living. We can't always be in touch with our death, right? It's important to get in touch with it. It's important to confront it, to think about it, to talk about it. But if we're getting to the point, right, where we're always aware of it, we may find ourselves quite paralyzed. Anyway, so we have to find ways to defend against it. That we have to find ways to protect ourselves from always being in touch with our anxieties. That is totally fine. The problem is when our defenses start to get very rigid. So it's not really, the problem isn't really the existence of defenses. It's over-reliance on defenses or over-reliance on a certain set of defenses. The more flexible we can be with what defenses we elicit or we use, the kind of healthier the psyche. And so it's important to know, okay, so kind of back to the theme here, a really important concept for living a better life is that the more we know ourselves, the better. And in that understanding comes first an acknowledgement that we can't know everything about ourselves, that there is an unconscious way in which there are unconscious processes. There are things that will always be on some level out of our awareness. And that is not just, that is a function, that is a product of the way in which our mind works. It's not a function or it's not an illustration of your being brokenness or you not being perfect enough. We all have an unconscious. And the ways in which we protect ourselves from our unconscious are called defenses. And the more that we understand our own defenses, the more that we understand what we're so frightened of in our unconscious, the more we can know ourselves, the more space we can have for all of these processes to happen inside of ourselves without the shame or the sense of there's something broken within us for experiencing, for example, a defense. So there are a number of defenses, and some of them are more popular and well-known than others. Like we have denial. That's a really popular one, like popular in that we know it well, like you're in denial, right? And we can see how painful it is when people are in denial. We can see that they may be in denial because they're really scared of confronting something in themselves, right? There's projection, where we imagine that the other person is feeling something that may actually be ours. And it's, we're putting it onto them. We're saying you're angry when really we're angry because we're having a hard time tolerating our own anger. There's rationalization where we are able to explain our uncomfortable feelings with really logical reasons. Of course, there's intellectualization, where we intellectualize, we move into a knowing space to avoid the discomfort of the not knowing. There's like sublimation, where we channel really traumatic or painful feelings into socially acceptable, productive activities, like doctors who experience something really traumatic as a child, like a something really bad, like a car accident. And so now they want to be doctors and they want to help people in a way that maybe they weren't helped. That would be a sign. That would be a sublimation. And you may be thinking, what's wrong with that? Like, what's wrong with something? And that question, again, tells us that maybe you are understanding defenses as a sign that there's something wrong. And there isn't anything wrong with defenses. It's a part of being human. Exploring them in therapy, though, can provide insight into how we cope with challenges, right? And like what the patterns are that might shape our relationships and our self-perception. It's just important to know these things.